Welcome to Grim Gaslight. Before we descend into the shadows of today's history, make sure you are subscribed and have the bell notification turned on. Because the story you are about to hear is not a piece of folklore, nor is it a ghost story whispered in the dark to frighten children. It is a documented historical fact, a stain on the Victorian era that many tried to scrub away. It involves one of the most prolific serial killers in human history, a woman who did not look like a monster. She looked like a grandmother. She looked like a savior. But beneath her bonnet and her Bible lay the mind of a predator who murdered more innocent lives than Jack the Ripper ever could have dreamed of. The date is March 30th, 1896. The setting is the River Thames, near the town of Reading, just west of the sprawling smog of London. It was a biting, cold grey morning. The river moved sluggishly, thick with the industrial runoff and waste of a society in overdrive. A bargeman, navigating his vessel through the murky waters, spotted something floating near the bank. It wasn't unusual to find debris in the Thames. Dead dogs, discarded furniture, and sacks of rubbish were common sights. But something about this particular package unsettled him. It was bobbing in the water, wrapped tightly in brown paper and wet, heavy carpet. It seemed too deliberate to be mere trash. Driven by a curiosity he would soon regret, the bargeman hooked the package and hauled it onto the mud of the riverbank. He pulled out a knife and sliced through the sodden twine. As the wet brown paper fell away, he didn't find old clothes or garbage. He found a foot, a tiny, pale human foot. Inside the package was the body of a baby girl, later identified as Helena Fry. She had been dead for some time, her skin cold and clammy from the river, but the coroner would later confirm that it wasn't the water that killed her. Around her small, fragile neck was a length of white dressmaker's edging tape. It was tied tight, with a double knot that spoke of a chilling, professional efficiency. This was not an accident. This was not a natural death. This was an execution. But as the police examined the soggy brown paper that had served as this child's coffin, they found the mistake the single, careless error that would unravel a 20-year reign of terror. Faintly written on the paper, barely legible after being submerged in the river water, was a name and an address: Mrs. Thomas, 26 Piggott's Road. This faint scrawl would lead detectives not to a gang of violent thugs or a deranged madman hiding in an alley, but to the door of a respectable, 57-year-old nurse named Amelia Dyer. To her neighbours, she was a pious, church-going woman who loved children and quoted scripture. But in the dark underbelly of Victorian society, she was known by a different name, a name that whispered of death and deception, the Angel Maker. To truly understand how a woman like Amelia Dyer could operate for so long without being caught, we must first peel back the romantic veneer of the Victorian era and look at its brutal, unforgiving morality. In the late 19th century, to be a single mother was not just a difficult circumstance. It was a social and economic death sentence. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 had fundamentally changed British society. It absolved fathers of illegitimate children from almost all financial obligation. The law stated, in cold text, that the burden of the child fell 100% on the mother. If a young servant girl, a shop assistant, or a farmer's daughter got pregnant out of wedlock, she lost everything. She would be fired from her job instantly, for no respectable house would employ a fallen woman. She would be kicked out of her family home to avoid scandal. She had two choices, both horrific. She could enter the workhouse, a prison-like institution, where she would be separated from her child and forced into backbreaking labor for a crust of bread. Or she could starve on the streets. This desperation created a market. A dark, predatory industry emerged from the shadows: baby farming. These were women who placed advertisements in local newspapers, offering a solution to these terrified mothers. The ads were written with calculated warmth, designed to manipulate the vulnerable. They read, "Respectable, married couple with a nice country home seeks healthy baby to adopt. A good life guaranteed, premium required. For a young mother standing on the precipice of ruin, this looked like a miracle from God. She could pay a fee usually around £10, which was a massive sum at the time, equivalent 2 months of wages, and believed that her child would grow up loved, fed, and educated in a good home. She wasn't abandoning her baby, she told herself. She was saving it. She was giving it the life she couldn't provide. Amelia Dyer was the queen of this industry. She didn't just participate in it. She perfected it. She looked the part flawlessly. She was a trained nurse, which gave her an air of medical authority. She spoke softly, dressed modestly in black, and seemingly doted on the children in her care. When a terrified young mother handed over her newborn and her life savings, Amelia would often weep, wiping tears from her eyes, promising to treat the child as her own flesh and blood. She would invite the mother to write letters and promise to send photographs as the child grew. But the moment the door closed and the mother walked away into the fog, the mask fell. Amelia Dyer wasn't running a nursery. She was running a slaughterhouse. In the early days of her career, Amelia used the common method of negligence. Murder was risky, but neglect was hard to prove. She would simply stop feeding the babies. To keep them quiet, while they slowly starved to death, she dosed them with Godfrey's cordial, a popular Victorian syrup made of opium and treacle, known on the streets as Mother's Friend. The babies would slip into a narcotic coma. Their cries would cease. They would sleep while their bodies consumed themselves. Eventually, they would pass away from malnutrition. It was cruel, it was agonizing, but it was slow. And for a businesswoman like Amelia Dyer, slow was bad for business. She realized the grim economics of her trade. Every day a baby was alive, it cost her money in food or opium. Every day a baby occupied a crib, it took up space that could be sold to a new client. She needed a faster turnover. She needed to clear the inventory to secure the next £10 fee. So, she evolved. She stopped waiting for nature to take its course. She began using the white edging tape, the same kind found on the body in the Thames. It was a common item, found in any sewing kit, raising no suspicion if bought in bulk. She would wrap it around the infant's neck and tighten it. She later told the police, with a chilling lack of emotion, that she liked to watch them as the life left their eyes. Once the child was dead, she would strip the body of its clothes she would later sell to pawnbrokers for extra profit. She would wrap the small corpse in brown paper, weigh it down with a brick or a rock, and dump it in the river under the cover of darkness. Then, she would place a new ad in the paper the very next morning. The space was free, the trap was reset. Amelia was intelligent. She knew the law was always sniffing around. She moved constantly to avoid suspicion, using a carousel of aliases: Mrs. Thomas, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Harding. She moved from town to town, from Bristol to Reading, always staying one step ahead of the local constables and the angry mothers who returned to find their children moved to a better home or passed away from natural causes. She even spent time in mental asylums, feigning insanity whenever the heat got too high, using the hospitals as a hideout until the trouble blew over. But by 1896, arrogance had made her careless. The package found by the bargeman had her address on it. The river, which had been her accomplice for so long, had finally betrayed her. The police, led by Detective Inspector Anderson, realized they were dealing with a monster, but they had a problem. Finding a body with an address wasn't enough to convict her of murder. They needed to catch her in the act. They needed to prove she was soliciting babies for money. They set a trap. They couldn't just arrest her. They needed to be the bait. They used a young woman as a decoy to answer one of Amelia's newspaper ads. They composed a letter, pretending to be a desperate, wealthy woman looking to hide a scandal. They set up a meeting for the evening of April 3rd. Amelia Dyer, blinded by greed, fell for it completely. She was expecting a new client, a new baby, and a fresh payment of cash. She prepared her home, perhaps even preparing the white tape. Instead, when she opened her door, she didn't find a helpless mother. She found Detective Inspector Anderson and two constables. When the police raided her home at 45 Kensington Road in Reading, they were hit by a wall of smells. It was a nauseating mix of fried bacon, stale alcohol, and the unmistakable, sweet, sickly stench of human decomposition. Amelia tried to play the innocent old lady, indignant at the intrusion, but the house was a graveyard of evidence. They didn't find fresh bodies in the house. Amelia was too efficient for that, but they found everything else. The house was filled with the ghosts of the children she had killed. They found telegrams arranging adoptions from all over England. They found pawn tickets for hundreds of items of baby clothing. They found letters, stacks of them, from mothers begging for news of their children. Letters that Amelia had never opened and never intended to answer. And, most chilling of all, they found the white edging tape, rolls of it. The exact same tape found around the neck of Helena Fry. Amelia Dyer was arrested, but the full scale of her crimes was yet to be revealed. The police realized that the body in the river wasn't an isolated incident. They ordered the dragging of the River Thames near her usual dumping spots. What they found shocked the Victorian world to its core. Over the next few weeks, the river gave up its dead. Bodies began to surface. Some were fresh, preserved by the cold water. Others were just tiny skeletons, reduced to bone by the currents and the fish. They found 6 babies almost immediately. Each one had the white tape around its neck, Amelia's signature. But the police knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Amelia had been operating for 20 years. Based on the number of ads she placed, the clothes she pawned, and the frequency of her moves, the police estimated that over 2 decades, she had murdered potentially 400 infants. Let that number sink in. 400 lives. This number makes Amelia Dyer one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history, surpassing modern monsters like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer by a terrifying margin. And she did it all while hiding in plain sight, disguised as a caregiver. During her interrogation, Amelia remained unnervingly calm. When the police told her they were finding bodies with tape around their necks, she didn't panic. She simply replied, with the air of a craftsman discussing her work, "You'll know all of mine by the tape." She didn't deny the killings. Instead, she tried to play her old card, insanity. She claimed she had visions, that she heard voices telling her to do it. She reminded them of her time in the asylums. Her daughter, Polly, who had often helped her mother in the business, testified against her to save her own skin, painting a picture of a woman who was perfectly sane, cold, and calculated. The trial at the Old Bailey was a media sensation. The public was horrified. They crowded the streets, demanding justice for the Angel Maker. The trial lasted only 2 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury, faced with the mountain of tiny clothes and the testimony of the police divers, took just 4.5 minutes to reach a verdict: guilty. On June 10, 1896, at 9 a.m., Amelia Dyer walked to the gallows at Newgate Prison. She was filled with gin, her daily habit to steel her nerves. As she stood on the trapdoor, the noose was placed around the neck that had breathed life, while her hands choked it out of hundreds of others. The chaplain asked her if she had any final words, any confession to make to God. She stared ahead, her eyes empty, and said, "I have nothing to say." The lever was pulled, the trapdoor opened. The Angel Maker dropped. Amelia Dyer was dead, but her legacy lived on. Her crimes were so horrific, so industrial in their scale, that they forced the British government to finally act. The Infant Life Protection Act was passed quickly after her death. It gave local authorities the power to inspect homes where children were adopted, and made it illegal to adopt a child for a lump sum payment without police registration. The modern systems of child protection we have today, the checks and balances that keep vulnerable children safe, were born from the ashes of Amelia's victims. We often look back at the Victorian era with a sense of nostalgia. We think of the stiff upper lip, the tea, the polite society, but beneath the surface, it was a world where poverty was a crime punishable by starvation. It was a world where a woman could turn murder into a franchise, preying on the most vulnerable members of society, desperate mothers and helpless infants, while the world looked the other way. Amelia Dyer is gone. Her house in Reading is long gone. But the river keeps its secrets. Historians believe that many of the bodies were never recovered, washed out to sea or buried deep in the mud of the Thames. How many other angel makers were out there, operating in the silence of the gaslight, who were never caught? How many fortunes were built on the £10 fees of dead children? If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit the like button. It helps us shed light on history's darkest corners so they are never repeated. And tell us in the comments below, do you think the swift hanging of Amelia Dyer was justice served? Or was it too easy an escape for a woman who caused so much suffering? Don't forget to subscribe to Grim Gaslight and ring the bell for your weekly dose of history's darkest secrets.